Welcome back to Trading 360. I'm Nicole Pedalides. It's time for the Big Three. Three stocks, three charts, three trades. Ben Watson will take us through the charts. Here to take us through the trades, Jessica Inskip, Director of Investor Research at stockbrokers.com. Jessica, good to see you. Good morning to you. We continue to see the volatility. Some of your big picture thoughts here.
Yeah, picking up where we were discussing last week, Nicole, about the disparity of soft data and hard data. We got more soft data today with consumer confidence. Don't forget we have GDP later on this week as well as PCE. So I'm looking for that hard data to see if that really translates. And actually this morning, I love the way Phil Rosen stated in his opening Daily Bell newsletter this morning, investors aren't positioning for trade policy to work or fail. They're betting on it not being blindsided. I thought that was just a really interesting way to put where we are in the current market. Is we just need certainty and we don't think we're going to be blindsided. So really our next catalyst or moment is April 2nd, and my trades today are positioning for April 2nd.
That's interesting. So a lot of folks originally thought April 2nd was almost like a doomsday. But as we start to learn more and more about tariffs and trade policy and, maybe some flexibility from the administration and a little more piecemeal, it'll be interesting to hear details as we get up to that date, too. Verizon's the first name on your list today. Let's hear a little about that, Jessica.
Absolutely. So this is adding income. I'm focusing everything on adding income today. Actually, Verizon has a dividend yield of about 6.25%. They also showed up on my technical scan that I run weekly, looking for a crossover of the 13 and 26 weekly moving averages. And I liked the chart there. However, digging a little deeper, I found that it's rather neutral. Going into analyst opinions, most of them are citing Verizon as a hold, with the main reason being lacking any type of catalyst. And when that happens, like we saw with tech back in 2023, that sets the bar really low, which means any type of positive news would serve as a very big catalyst when we have just such low expectations, if you will. And on top of that, Verizon is one of the few securities where 100% of its sales is domestic. So if something very bad comes out within April 2nd, we at least have where this is a very domestic play and we're not relying in any international sales.
Oh, that's interesting, actually. I didn't think about that. You're very right about that. Let's see. Ben Watson, good morning to you. Look at the charts, please.
Good morning, Nicole. And I'll tell you what, Jessica's absolutely right on here when she talks about the fact that this has really been kind of that sideways or neutral play. And you can see, just looking at the yearly chart, Nicole, that this has been coalescing right around this 43 mark, kind of finding that support and resistance area. But what's really kind of interesting as we look into the chart, you start to get this this move on those small news items. And I think Jessica said something really interesting. You see this last little move that Verizon made about 3 or 4 weeks ago, where it made a big oscillating move to the upside and then a big corresponding oscillating move down to the downside. In fact, touching off of the 200 period moving average there. That came on relatively small news, and that can happen when stocks get into kind of this sideways kind of wait and see mode. And I think setting up for that April 2nd number becomes kind of this sideways. It's like any other event out there in the future with the market looking forward at what might happen. And you tend to get a bit of a wait and see perspective. You can kind of see that across the board here on Verizon, Nicole, as we're kind of range bounding between this 43 support and a potential area of resistance up there around 44.5 at the moment.
Understood. And, I was thinking about both Verizon and AT&T, similar but different, right? I mean, both in telecom, both more here at home. But, Verizon, according to RBC, Verizon to see softer postpaid net adds in the first quarter. Don't love that headline for Verizon today from RBC. Jessica, final thoughts here on a name that hit a high not that long ago. Some of your thoughts.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think the whole market is in wait and see mode. We were in this disparity between soft data and hard data. Now we're waiting to see what translates into hard data, waiting to see what happens on April 2nd. But specifically Verizon, this is why I want to account for that dividend. I feel neutral in this security, but it does give me 6.25% worth of dividend. And that's something that is more of a play for income rather than capital appreciation.
Right. All right. Next up, Apple. Good old Apple. What's going on here? Right. In 1 month, it's down 10%. But there's still people who love Apple for the long term. Where do you think we should be looking at when we come to Apple?
Yeah, so I definitely wanted to pop in and look at where tech was doing today ahead of my stock picks, and I think it's a great time to write some covered calls. At least this morning when it was spiking, I think Apple made the mistake of announcing AI capabilities prior to the product being available. They are not known for doing that. When they announce something and they have those big meetings, it's ready to be available right away. They took something very different and that hasn't played up well for them. Much like I recall when Google had a PR issue with Bard, it since has released Gemini and a lot of other products. It overcame that. So I am expecting Apple to do the same thing. This is a hold it, not buy it, not trade it type of thing. But we also need to consider what Apple's doing. Apple is telling us that they're purchasing more NVIDIA chips. Apple is telling us that they have these partnerships, which tells us AI is in the works. We just really want to see exactly what it is. And it's because they told us that. So again, wait and see. But we have to also remember there are other revenue streams. They expanded Apple TV Plus to Android users. That's a very big new revenue stream that could possibly translate over into earnings, and they benefit from productivity app adoption. So for example, their revenue grew 50% year over year in their fiscal year for the second quarter by productivity apps. And that means people downloading ChatGPT. And since that's available in the App Store, Apple's going to benefit from that as well. So writing a covered call, I actually selected a place very, very different than I usually do. Only went out 10 days, so it's a little after April 2nd. So April 4th, my resistance is actually at the 13 weekly moving average, which is around 230. So I want to give myself some capital appreciation. I'm capturing income of about $112 altogether, but this means if I own Apple, if it goes any higher, I'm capping my gains to 230, but in exchange for capping those gains, I'm bringing in an extra $112.
Understood. Okay. And look, they have faced some stiff competition in China, no doubt, but Apple AI is supposed to be a big deal. And I'm not sure if it's a super cycle, but it's still a big deal and probably will be selling some more units of everything for them. Ben, thoughts?
Yeah, Nicole, this is such a fascinating stock. I mean, it always has been from the perspective of investor behavior. And if you look at the course of really the majority of this last year, this 225 level has been in focus. And it's been that area where you see a pretty sharp sell down and then a little bit of a push back up and then a push significantly higher. What I think is really interesting is if you look at Apple in relationship, say, for instance, to other Mag 6 stocks or other tech leaders, this has been almost for a lot of institutional investors and perhaps a lot of retail investors as well, kind of that strategic cash reserve, if you will. So when there's been opportunities in other spaces, they've sold down their Apple positions. And then when Apple starts to move back in a bullish direction, when it gets down near some of these support levels, either the 200 period moving average, the 100 period moving average, they've been starting to buy it back up and refill that strategic cash reserve, if you will. You see what's going on here now with the RSI down in that lower panel. We get a reversal. It's really the first time that we've seen a sustained push over the course of a couple of trading days down below that oversold level. That for some algorithmic traders, for some institutional traders that have particular signals in mind or in their playbook, could be a potential buy signal. And we've seen it off the last 2 or 3 candles, especially that big bullish engulfing candle that we saw to end last week. And then again, the move yesterday and today above the 200 period moving average can be kind of the corroboration of that signal. So some solid buying pressure here and momentum to the upside. I think another trading signal potentially could come on a break both above this 100 and the 225 level, kind of that horizontal resistance level. That could be, again, an indication that with other opportunities maybe waning, starting to see institutional and retail investors stepping back in here to reload on something that is and has been relatively consistent, especially as they start to work through, as Jessica very expertly pointed out, that they're resolving some of those AI issues, but you do have some resistance up there around that 230, 231 level. And then beyond that, up into those previous highs up around that 248. Will it get there? That remains to be seen, or will there be other opportunities and you start to see some selling of that upward rip, if you will, as opposed to just buying the dip, which is what's gone on over here over the course of the last week or so, Nicole.
Okay, and last but not least, thank you for all of that, Ben. And then last but not least, we look at Amazon, which is well off the 242 high we saw not that long ago in February. Just a quick thought here, Jessica.
Yeah, absolutely. Amazon, if you don't own it, I think it's a great time to position it into your portfolio. If anything, on my technical scan, it was showing more of upward momentum than the others in the way that I look at it. And it wasn't long ago that Andy Jassy noted that AWS had insatiable demand as related to AI. There are updates that are going to happen with Alexa Plus. Perhaps that will add more revenue. There, of course, is that e-commerce and tariffs that we have to be cognizant of. But Amazon is a very big company with very big supply chains. So it's going to be interesting to watch. So to position this, again, very different than the way I normally would position options, only going out 10 days. But if I do something at the money earlier today about April 4th, 205, I could capture $407 altogether. So if this does go down, I actually reduced my break even to about $200 per share, which I'm okay owning because I believe in Amazon in the long term.
Okay, and let's see what Ben says about the technicals on Amazon. Ben?
I'll tell you what, Nicole, bounce off the 191. It's been building for a couple of weeks here. Corresponding to that, look at the RSI. It built this inverted head and shoulders, which kind of, it doesn't work the same way as support and resistance levels on the price, but it gives us an illustration of kind of that effort that's going on. Momentum was starting to build, and finally we get the bounce up off of the support level. Inverted head and shoulders on that RSI with a pretty strong breakout. That gives me some idea from a technical basis that this move has some oomph behind it. But there's a pretty good resistance up overhead at about the 216 mark. You've got a little bit potentially of a confluence there with a short-term moving average, and then that gets it back up to some previous highs. But if you look at the volume profile tool, which is a measure of activity at a price level, the number of trades going on at a particular price level, this 191 kind of falls at an activity vacuum. So if we see the price coming back down, that could be an area where it moves back through. Now, not very far, because there's a point of control on that volume profile down around that 186 mark. Could be a stronger level of support. But I think it's up and away here at this particular point from a technical analysis basis. It just needs to keep that momentum going, and we could see some continued bullishness here, Nicole.
All right. And Jessica, April 2nd, I mean, how do you think April 2nd goes? Do you want to try to navigate that day, where we are at the end of the day, what kind of day we might see on April 2nd?
I expect heightened volatility because of the massive amount of uncertainty that will be there, but it's rather unpredictable. I expect 0 DTE options to heavily be traded. So we're going to have to pull a lot of technicals and actually look at positionings from an option perspective to even see some unwinding. That is the way that I would tackle that day. But it's certainty. Even if we go back to the election, because of just heightened uncertainty, that increase in implied volatility, once we get some type of certainty, the market tends to react rather positively, but it's really up in the air. It really is.
Right. All right. Thank you both, Jessica and Skip. Ben Watson, the big three today. We looked at Verizon, Apple, and Amazon. Always fun to have the big three and these trades and the outlook. Thank you both so much.